10% even. America's unemployment rate, an unexpected drop this week. And someone here says the best way to keep it dropping is for the president to stop listening to unions. What just happened this week proves it. Hi, everybody. I'm David Eisen. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus with Steve Forbes, Elizabeth McDonald, and Neil Weinberg, along with Mike Ozanian, Mike Maiello, and Quentin Hardy. So, Steve, what happened this week is that Mercedes-Benz moved 1,000 workers from Germany to Alabama because Alabama is a non-union state. So that increases our workforce.
Yes, it does. And you find in the private sector, that's why private sector workers stay away from the unions. Unions are less than 8% the private sector. Government sector, where the politician can force it, it's almost up to 40%. Unions want to spend, they want to tax. Look what they did to General Motors. Look what they did to Chrysler, reduced their workforce effectively 90%. Steel industry. And on the state level, look how many states they're bankrupting. What more do you need?
So, Mike Maiello, if we want more jobs, we need more non-union shops.
We need union and non-union shops. We need a variety. And I just don't see why you want to cut labor out of the discussion of job creation. Someone has to work these jobs after all. You know, I look at the 19th century. That's when labor had no voice. We worked 7 days a week. Children worked in factories, you know, and there was no minimum wage. So unions gave us a lot of great things, like weekends. Keep them in the conversation.
But if we want more jobs now, it's not a union shop that's going to draw them in, Emac.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, just speaking to Steve Forbes' example, bringing up GM, company was losing $80 billion before the U.S. taxpayer stepped in to rescue them. In 2007, losing $3 billion a month. What did the UAW do but called a worker strike against 80 plants in the country? Now we see, of course, the UAW's membership is drastically down. It's been cut in half. That's what it got them.
Quentin, go ahead.
Mercedes is in Alabama because they've been there since '93, and Mercedes still makes 80% of its cars in Western Europe, but it's only 60% of its market. Of course they're going to move to other states. Alabama gave them a $250 million tax credit. That has as much to do with any union stuff. Look, the smallest union percentage in the country, compare it to the government, which is, in the 30s, where we all were in the 50s, in the 1950s, when 30% of the country was unionized, is the financial sector. 1.8% of that is unionized. The financial sector just took us into the biggest hole you can imagine. I'm not sure unions are really responsible for the problem.
Mike Ozanian?
If you want job creation, David, you don't bring the unions in, you bring small business owners in. They're responsible for over 80% of the job growth in this country over the last 25 years. The national average on a state-by-state basis for union membership is 12.4%. The 10 states that have the lowest unemployment rates, none of them are above the national average.
And Neil, nobody's talking about banning unions. There's nothing wrong with unions. It's just that non-union shops do draw more jobs.
I don't know that they draw more jobs. You know, I think, as Mike said, we need a mix. But, you know, to say that we're not going to talk to unions about this whole issue is absurd. Would you not talk to doctors about health care? Would you not talk to generals about the war in Afghanistan? Would you not talk to Tiger Woods about driving Escalades? I mean, this is crazy.
You can talk, but you're not pushing pro-union policy, Steve. Right. That's the point.
If you want to talk to them, if you want to pick their brains, make sure they don't pick your pockets and do the opposite of what they recommend, which is raising taxes, increasing spending, and making labor unaffordable, which at the end of the day hurts labor. Look at Western Europe, heavily unionized, couldn't create jobs like the United States, and very little innovation coming out of Western Europe.
And Emac, it's the emphasis from this administration particularly to push in the stimulus jobs, for example, union shops that don't necessarily offer the best bids.
Yeah, absolutely, because the unions pulled the vote for this administration. And also, they also want card check, right? They want to have getting rid of that secret ballot. Oh, no surprise, it's because union membership is dropping. It's a way to bully people to join the union. So that's a real danger zone for the workforce and for the small businesses who really are the drivers behind the U.S. economy.
You know, I think this whole idea, you can always pick on General Motors and say, oh, look, the unions ruined this company. Look at a company like Costco, which is unionized and has very good wages.
Neil,
I mean, you know, you can talk about that.
Neil, we are on the hook. The U.S. taxpayer for the automotive companies for what now? $100 billion. And the TARP Inspector General says the U.S. taxpayer will lose money on the auto bailouts that we gave to these companies that were unionized.
And Mike Maiello, the point is that was essentially a giveaway
elevators
from the taxpayer, courtesy of the administration, to the UAW, Mike.
You don't have to convince me. I never supported any of those auto bailouts, but AIG was a bailout just as bad. And anytime you bring up GM, I'm going to bring up up AIG.
That's true.
Non-union shop that has the same kind of handouts that we're on an even bigger hook for it.
Absolutely
Nearly
right.
$200
Go
billion.
back in time. In the early 70s, GM had 395,000 blue-collar workers. Today it's going to be down to 38,000. Unions did that.
Quentin, I don't think anybody's apologizing for any kind of bailouts here, whether it's to AIG or the unions. You shouldn't favor either one, right?
Yeah. Well, we seem to blame the woes of GM solely on unions, but management kept agreeing and management went along, and management treated itself like a breed apart. The blame is on both sides, and the solutions come from both sides.
No, well, what happened was the UAW called worker strikes at 80 plants in 2007. So what can they do? They had to buckle under because, get this, the UAW was worried about job security at a time when this company was losing a total now $80 billion. So yes, basically the workers, the unionized workers, were holding the management's back to the wall.
Well,
those
there's a
managers
reason
shouldn't have
why
paid themselves so
Mercedes-Benz is moving to Alabama. Tax credits are offered by Michigan as well, but they go, Mercedes and other companies go to Alabama
Union
instead.
shops don't have the flexibility that non-union shops do, and particularly when you're in a recession, David, companies have to be very adaptable. They have to move quickly. And I agree with Quentin on one point. We shouldn't listen to fat cat CEOs, and we should not listen to the unions. We have to listen to entrepreneurs and small business owners. They have the skin in the game.
Does Mr. Forbes believe that as well?
Absolutely. And hope as we climb out of this recession, I'll have more skin.
Yeah, and you know,
look at the White House summit this
You
week.
want a rational, not a greedy union, a rational union who knows what and figures out what management needs to keep their own jobs
Can
safe.
you think of an example of a union like that?
No, and if I find one, I'll show you Elvis riding by in a
Costco.
magic pony.
Quentin, go ahead.
Well, Costco, Neil gave a good one. Look at the White House job summit this week. The jobs part was the one part Obama really attended. And they talk about aid to small business. They talk about how government can't be the solution. They talk about tax credits for new hires. Those seem like pretty good ideas, don't they?
That's all he does is talk, but his actions make it harder and harder for small businesses to function. They can't borrow money, they can't increase their sales, and they're not hiring people.
Yeah,
Talk
they're
is
afraid.
cheap, Quentin.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't believe a word he says, why do you worry about who he has in?
Why? Because I'd like to see him bring in somebody that knows something about job creation, small business
Neil?
people, not these fat cat CEOs and unions.
Go ahead,
It's
Neil.
true that there's been a lot of overreach and greed by the unions, but also, you know, if they're going to fight for a living wage and for the benefits that people need, then that's important.
Yeah, so it is important. But at the same time, I think Mike is right. You know, this jobs fair or career day or whatever the White House held, you know, what the issue is, small businesses are afraid to hire. They're afraid of the smothering pillow of hyper-taxation and hyper-regulation on their businesses. That's what's holding them back. And credit, no credit.
And these non-union shops in the auto manufacturing, like Toyota, hardly pay minimum wage. 45 bucks an hour, very good wage, normal economy. They make cars that people like. It works, and they have work rule flexibility, which the union plants don't have.
And this unprecedented borrowing in debt by Obama, where he's shoving all these treasury bills on banks' balance sheets, is making it impossible for small businesses to borrow.